Hello everyone, this is the 5th Epical Revelation Fellowship. I'm Reverend Dr. Roger Paul, and today is Sunday, the 22nd of June, 2014. Today we're going to study paper 129, The Later Adult Life of Jesus. And that starts on page 1419.1. That's 1419.1. That's paper 129, 0.1. Say a little prayer and we'll get started here. Father, thank you for bringing us together today, and thank you for the opportunity to study this wonderful revelation. Please bless this group today as we study Jesus' life, and we thank you and we give you the praise in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so this is paper 129, The Later Adult Life of Jesus. Let me get to the first slide here. Later adult life of Jesus. Jesus had fully and finally separated himself from the management of the domestic affairs of the Nazareth family and from the immediate direction of its individuals. He continued right up to the event of his baptism to contribute to the family finances and to take a keen personal interest in the spiritual welfare of every one of his brothers and sisters. And always was he ready to do everything humanly possible for the comfort and happiness of his widowed mother. So Jesus tried to take care of his family all the way up to the time he left. Bear with me 1 second here. All right. Diane, would you like to take the next paragraph? Mute your mic. I'll get it. The Son of Man and now made every preparation for detaching himself permanently from the Nazareth home, and this was not easy for him to do. Jesus naturally loved his people. He loved his family, and this natural affection had been tremendously augmented by his extraordinary devotion to them. The more fully we bestow ourselves upon our fellows, the more we come to love them. And since Jesus had given himself so fully to his family, he loved them with great and fervor affection.
Mom phone is calling. Say insert or reject.
Mom, I'm having a meeting. I'm recording right now. Can I call you later?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next paragraph. It's like I'm here by myself today. All of the family had slowly awakened to the realization that Jesus was making ready to leave. The sadness of this anticipation anticipated separation was only tempered by this graduated method of preparing them for the announcement of his intended departure. For more than 4 years they discerned that he was planning for this eventual separation. So he made plans long before he separated from his family to do so. Section 1, the 27th year. Hello, Millie. Are you out there? Good morning. We're on page 1219.4. Okay. And that's section 1. And if you would like to, go ahead and read that section, that first paragraph.
Did you want me to read the first paragraph?
Yeah. Would you like to? Please.
Section 1, the 27th year, AD 21. In January of this year, AD 21, on a rainy Sunday morning, Jesus took unceremonious leave of his family, only explaining that he was going over to Tiberias and then on to visit to other cities about the Sea of Galilee. And thus he left them, never again to be a regular member of that household.
So this is when he finally left on the Sunday morning. And I have a picture here of a map of Jesus travels during this period of time. And if you can see, Millie, can you see the picture behind me today?
Never can, no.
No, never can.
I
Okay.
can actually.
Okay, Diane can. She's at the other house. Okay, so this is a picture of Galilee, and you can, and Nazareth is in the background. Also, on the picture, basically it shows the pathway when Jesus left January AD 21, and then he goes to Tiberias, through Magdala, Bethsaida, and through Chorazin, and eventually over to Capernaum. Okay, and that's what that picture is. All right, next paragraph. Diane, would you like to take the next one?
Okay. He spent 1 week at Tiberias, the new city which was soon to succeed Sepphoris as the capital of Galilee. And finding little to interest him, he passed on successfully through Magdala, Bethsaida, to Capernaum, where he stopped to pay a visit to his father's friend Zebedee. Zebedee's sons were fishermen. He himself was a boat builder. Jesus of Nazareth was an expert in both designing and building. He was a master at working with wood, and Zebedee had long known of the skill of the Nazareth craftsmen. For a long time, Zebedee had contemplated making improved boats. He now laid his plans before Jesus and invited the visiting carpenter to join in the enterprise, and Jesus readily consented.
Okay, and I have another picture here. I'll get over to it. This is another picture of Galilee, and basically that's a picture of about 12. And you can see in this picture, if you could see it, basically the Sea of Galilee and Capernaum being right on the edge of the Sea of Galilee. This is a pretty good picture of that for study. All right. Keep going here. Also, I have some pictures of Capernaum. Let me go through those real quick with y'all. See if I can tell you what these are. This is the remains of the village of Capernaum, right outside the synagogue in Capernaum. This is another picture of the ruins. You can see the synagogue right in the background in the corner here. This is supposedly what's known as Peter's house, according to tradition. And there's about 4 pictures of this in here. That's basically the stone wall in the center of the house, and another of that same stone wall. And this is what it looks down. This is the excavation of Peter's house, what they believe is Peter's house. The next picture is a picture of a boat, and this is believed. They call this the Jesus boat because it was built. It was found off Capernaum. And let me read y'all some of this interesting stuff about this boat. Since Jesus was a boat builder, he started this process of steaming the wood to make it curved, and that's what this is, a picture of a boat that's curved. Also, let me read a little bit. This is getting a little bit off track, but I think it's kind of interesting because they think Jesus may have actually built this boat or built a boat like this. All right. Did this boat witness the events sweeping over the Sea of Galilee in Jesus' time? Is it the boat that bore the Nazarene and his disciples that surrounded villages to preach the gospel of the people? Perhaps this was an ordinary fishing craft which was converted to use in battle in the great first Jewish rebellion against the Romans, or it was simply a fishing boat that plied the waters of the quest of the daily catch until it was scuttled in an abandoned shore. So, and this is another picture of the boat. And some other information on here. This is the chart of the types of wood that they used to build these boats during Jesus' time. And this is really interesting because in one boat they have the following types of woods. They have Christ thorn wood, it's called. They have carob wood, Alapo pine, hawthorn, cedar, Tabor oak, most of it's Tabor oak, sycamore, laurel, willow, Judas tree, plane tree, and the Atlantic tabarinth. So all these different types of wood were used to build the boats. In other words, they used whatever they could find. And then there's some other information on the slides that you can look at and read through. It has more information about the boats here too. This is also a picture of the synagogue. We're going to get to that in a minute. Here we go. All right, I'll take the next chapter. Next. Jesus worked with Zebedee only a little more than a year, but during this time he created a new style of boat and established entirely new methods of boat making. By superior technique, this greatly improved methods of steaming the boards, that's what we were just looking at, Jesus and Zebedee began to build boats of a very superior type, craft, which were far more safe for sailing than the lake than the older types. For several years, Zebedee had more work turning out these new style boats than his small establishment could handle. In less than 5 years, practically all the craft on the lake had been built in the shop of Zebedee of Capernaum. Jesus became well known to the Galilean fisherfolk as the designer of the new boats. So because of Jesus's contribution to this boat building, almost every boat along Capernaum was built by the Zebedee shop. And that's also why Jesus got such a large amount of funds from the Zebedees to take care of his mother, which is kind of interesting if you think about it. So it was a skilled in boat making that allowed him to do this. All right, Millie, would you take the next one?
Zebedee was a moderately well-to-do man. His boat building shops were on the lake to the south of Capernaum, and his home was situated down the lake shore near the fishing headquarters of Bethsaida. Jesus lived in a house of Zebedee. During the year and more he remained in Capernaum. He had long worked alone in the world, that is, without a father, and greatly enjoyed this period of working with a father partner.
So he kind of adopted the senior Zebedee, as his father partner then, didn't he? Which kind of gives him a father influence, which is kind of interesting.
It's always hard to work alone.
It's always hard to work alone, especially building boats and things like that, right? All right. Diane, would you take the next one?
Zebedee's wife Salome was a relative of Annas, one-time high priest at Jerusalem and still the most influential of the Sadducean group, having been deposed only 8 years previously. Salome became a great admirer of Jesus. She loved him as she loved her own sons, James, John, and David, while her 4 daughters looked upon Jesus as their elder brother. Jesus often went out fishing with James, John, and David, and they learned that he was an experienced fisherman as well as an expert boat builder.
You know, it's interesting about this, the movies we see about Jesus coming upon the fishing folk and that sort of thing. It gives you the impression that they'd never met him, but according to this, they had been fishing with him many times, him being a boat builder, right? So they all knew that he knew the fishing trade very well. Gives you a different way to look at it. All of this year, Jesus sent money each month to James. He returned to Nazareth in October to attend Martha's wedding, and he was not again in Nazareth for over 2 years, when he returned shortly before the double wedding of Simon and Jude. Okay. Millie, would you take the next one?
Throughout this year, Jesus built boats and continued to observe how men lived on earth. Frequently, he would go down to visit at the caravan station, Capernaum being on the direct travel route from Damascus to the south. Capernaum was a strong Roman military post, and the garrison's commanding officer was a Gentile believer in Yahweh, a devout man. As the Jews were wont to designate such proselytes, a a devout man. I guess that's what the Jews called
Yeah.
these kind. Yeah, the officer belonged to a wealthy Roman family, and he took it upon himself to build a beautiful synagogue in Capernaum, which had been presented to the Jews a short time before Jesus came to live with Zebedee. Jesus conducted the services in this new synagogue more than half the time of this year, and some of the caravan people who chanced to attend remembered him as the carpenter of Nazareth.
Okay.
I imagine somebody remembered him from somewhere.
Yeah, really. You know, it's interesting too that it was a Roman that built the synagogue there in Capernaum too.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of interesting? All right. Diane, would you take the next one?
When it came to the payment of taxes, Jesus registered himself as a skilled craftsman of Capernaum. From this day on to the end of his earth life, he was known as a resident of Capernaum. He never claimed any other legal residence, although he did, for various reasons, permit others to assign his residence to Damascus, Bethany, Nazareth, and even Alexandria.
All right. So he was a resident, considered resident of these places when it was convenient for him to do so, right? At the Capernaum synagogue, he found many new books in the library chest, and he spent at least 5 evenings a week at intense study. One evening he devoted to social life with the older folks, and one evening he spent with the young people. There was something gracious and inspiring about the personality of Jesus, which invariably attracted young people. He always made them feel at ease in his presence. Perhaps his great secret in getting along with them consisted in the twofold fact that he is always interested in what they were doing, and while he seldom offered them advice unless they asked for it. Isn't it interesting, back then, they entertained themselves, you know, doing different things different night. There was no TV, right? So they were more apt to be social with one another. And we kind of miss out on that a little bit nowadays, don't we? Okay. The Zebedee family almost worshiped Jesus, and they never failed to attend the conferences of questions and answers, which he conducted each evening after supper, before he departed for the synagogue to study. The youthful neighbors also came in frequently to attend these after-supper meetings. To these little gatherings, Jesus gave varied and advanced instruction, just as advanced as they could comprehend. He talked quite freely with them, expressing his ideas and ideals about politics, sociology, science, and philosophy, but never presumed to speak with authoritative finality, except when discussing religion and the relationship or the relation of man to God. So Jesus had his opinions about all these subjects, politics, sociology, science, and everything, but he only took authority when he was discussing religion. It's too bad more of us can't be just like that, right? Millie, would you take the next one?
Once a week, Jesus held a meeting with the entire household, shop, and shore helpers, for Zebedee had many employees. And it was among these workers that Jesus was first called the Master. They all loved him. He enjoyed his labors with Zebedee in Capernaum, but he missed the children playing out by the side of the Nazareth carpenter shop.
Okay, I've got some more pictures to share with y'all here. Let me get up here. Let me remind everyone at home that's watching this too, all these pictures and all these slides are found on AtlantaUranchistudygroup.org and Fifth Epical Revelation Fellowship.com. There's slides for each one of these lessons we have there. Now this is a picture of, let me make it larger here. This is a picture of the synagogue in Capernaum, and it points out here in the slide, it says the white limestone synagogue dating from the 4th and 5th century AD, recently excavations show another black basalt synagogue built during the first half of the 1st century, but only the foundation walls and other fragments remain below the white synagogue. And there's several pictures of this, and you can go out there online and see these, of the architecture of the synagogue, the column post. And there's something, here's another picture of the synagogue. There's something very interesting on this particular picture. It looks like a regular post, but on the post there's an inscription that says, Alphaeus, the son of Zebediah, the son of John, made this column. It may have been made for a blessing of him, but it's interesting that this could be considered Zebedee or Zebediah, and it's Alphaeus, the son of Zebediah, so it could be one of the Alphaeus twins also, of the 12 apostles. So that's what makes it kind of interesting. Also, there's some large round containers, which could be like the containers that held the water that Jesus turned into wine. All right. And also there's a mill and a grindstone. A couple of other pictures of that, and that's pretty much it. We'll come back to this picture. All right. Diane, would you take the next one?
I will. Of the sons of Zebedee, James was the most interested in Jesus as a teacher, as a philosopher. John cared most for his religious teachings and opinions. David respected him as a mechanic, but took little stock in his religious views and philosophical teachings.
And that's interesting because David is the one that starts the messenger corps, doesn't he? And he was the one least interested in his religious teachings. Frequently, Jude came over on the Sabbath to hear Jesus talk in the synagogue and would tarry to visit with him. And the more Jude saw of his elder brother, the more he became convinced that Jesus was a great man. Millie, would you take the next one, please?
This year, Jesus made great advances in the ascendant mastery of his human mind and attained new and higher levels of conscious contact with his indwelling thought adjuster.
Diane?
This was the last year of his settled life. Never again did Jesus spend a whole year in one place or at one undertaking. The days of his early pilgrimages were rapidly approaching. Periods of intense activity were not far in the future, but there were now about to intervene between his simple but intensely active life of the past and his still more intense and strenuous public ministry. A few years of extensive travel and highly diversified personal activity. His training as a man of the realm had to be completed before he could enter upon his career of teaching and preaching as a perfected God-man of the divine and post-human phases of his Urantia bestowal.
It's kind of interesting that they mention his career as a man of the realm had to be completed. So they wanted Jesus to be completely done with everything he was going to do before he did any teaching or preaching. So it must be part of the experiential thing of the bestowal. 2, the 28th year, AD 22. In March AD 22, Jesus took leave of Zebedee and of Capernaum. He asked for a small sum of money to defray his expenses to Jerusalem. While working with Zebedee, he had drawn only small sums of money, which each month he would send to the family at Nazareth. One month Joseph would come down to Capernaum for the money. The next month Jude would come over to Capernaum to get the money from Jesus and to take it to Nazareth. Jude's fishing headquarters was only a few miles south of Capernaum. All right. You remember that Jude was the trouble brother, and he eventually took up fishing right close to Capernaum. All right. Millie?
When Jesus took leave of Zebedee's family, he agreed to remain in Jerusalem until Passover time, and they all promised to be present for this event. They even arranged to celebrate the Passover supper together. They all sorrowed when Jesus left them, especially the daughters of Zebedee.
All right.
Before leaving Capernaum, Jesus had a long talk with his newfound friend and close companion, John Zebedee. He told John that he contemplated traveling extensively until my hour shall come, and asked John to act in his stead in the matter of sending some money to the family at Nazareth each month, until the funds due him should be exhausted. And John made him this promise. My teacher, go about your business, do your work in the world. I will act for you in this or any other matter, and I will watch over your family, even as I would foster my own mother and care for my own brothers and sisters. I will disperse your funds, which my Father holds as you have directed, and as they may be needed. And when your money has been expended, if I do not receive more from you, and if your mother is in need, then will I share my own earnings with her. Go your way in peace. I will act in your stead in all these matters.
Okay, so he basically took responsibility to take care of the needs of Jesus so that he could go about and do his business then, didn't he? Okay. Therefore, after Jesus had departed for Jerusalem, John consulted with his father Zebedee regarding the money due Jesus, and he was surprised that it was such a large sum. As Jesus had left the matter so entirely in their hands, they agreed that it would be the better plan to invest the funds in property and use the income for assisting the family at Nazareth. And since Zebedee knew of a little house in Capernaum, which carried a mortgage and was for sale, he directed John to buy this house with Jesus' money and hold the title in trust for his friend. And John did as his father advised him. For 2 years the rent of this house was applied to the mortgage, and this augmented by a certain large fund which Jesus presently sent up to John to be used as needed by the family almost equaled the amount of this obligation, and Zebedee supplied the difference, so that John paid up the remainder of the mortgage when it fell due, thereby securing the clear title to this 2-room house. In this way, Jesus became the owner of a house in Capernaum, but he had not been told about it. So Jesus was a property owner and he didn't even know it, did he? All right. Millie, would you take the next one?
When the family at Nazareth heard that Jesus had departed from Capernaum, they not knowing of this financial arrangement with John, believed the time had come for them to get along without any further help from Jesus. James remembered this contract with Jesus and, with the help of his brothers, forthwith assumed full responsibility for the care of the family.
So
Let us go back to observe Jesus in Jerusalem. For almost 2 months he spent the greater part of his time listening to the temple discussions, with occasional visits to the various schools of the rabbis. Most of the Sabbath days he spent at Bethany.
Now, I have a picture I wanted to show y'all of this. This is a map of Jerusalem, and let me blow it up a little bit here. And this is basically the Jewish temple here. I'm going to go up a little bit larger. And over to the right here is the home of Annas. You know, they talked about that retired. This is Annas. And down here is the home of Caiaphas. Did I pronounce that right? The one that sent Jesus to his death. But anyway, this is a map of that, and you can look at that at your leisure too. Okay. Jesus had carried with him to Jerusalem a letter from Salome, Zebedee's wife, introducing him to the former high priest Annas, and one of the same as my own son. Annas spent much time with him. Okay, and that's the home we just looked at. All right, personally taking him to visit the many academies of the Jerusalem religious teachers. While Jesus thoroughly inspected these schools and carefully observed their methods of teaching, he never so much as asked a single question in public. Although Annas looked upon Jesus as a great man, he was puzzled as to how to advise him. He recognized the foolishness of suggesting that he enter any of the schools of Jerusalem as a student, and yet, he well knew Jesus would never be accorded the status of a regular teacher, inasmuch as he has never been trained in these schools. Okay? Millie?
Presently, the time of the Passover drew near, and along with the throngs from every quarter, there arrived in Jerusalem from Capernaum Zebedee and his entire family. They all stopped at the spacious home of Amos, where they celebrated the Passover as one happy family.
Before the end of this Passover week, by apparent chance, Jesus met a wealthy traveler and his son, a young man about 17 years of age. These travelers hailed from India, and being on their way to visit Rome and various other points on the Mediterranean, they had arranged to arrive in Jerusalem during the Passover, hoping to find someone whom they could engage as interpreter for both and tutor for the son. The father was insistent that Jesus consent to travel with them. Jesus told them about his family and that it was hardly fair to go away for almost 2 years, during which time they might find themselves in need. Whereupon this traveler from the Orient proposed to advance to Jesus the wages of 1 year, so that he could entrust such funds to his friends for the safeguarding of his family against want. And Jesus agreed to make the trip.
Okay, so this is where Jesus met the travelers to go to Rome, right? And he gave them enough money to sustain his family for the entire first year. Okay, Jesus turned this large sum over to John, the son of Zebedee, and you have been told how John applied the money toward the liquidation of the mortgage on the Capernaum property. Jesus took Zebedee fully into his confidence regarding this Mediterranean journey, but he enjoined him to tell no man, not even his own flesh and blood. And Zebedee never did disclose his knowledge of Jesus' whereabouts during this long period of almost 2 years. Before Jesus returned from his trip, the family at Nazareth had just about given him up as dead. Only the assurances of Zebedee, who went up to Nazareth with his son John on several occasions, kept hope alive in Mary's heart. So John never revealed to anyone this trip that Jesus took. Alright, Millie.
During this time, the Nazareth family got along very well. Jude had considerably increased his quota and kept up the extra contribution until he was married. Notwithstanding that they required little assistance, it was the practice of John Zebedee to take presents each month to Mary and Ruth, as Jesus had instructed him.
Okay, so Jesus even made arrangements that they get a little extra each month, right? All right. Diane?
3. The 29th year, AD 23. The whole of Jesus' 29th year was spent finishing up the tour of the Mediterranean world. The main events, as far as we have permission to reveal these experiences, constitutes the subject of the narratives which immediately follow this paper.
Throughout this tour of the Roman world, for many reasons, Jesus was known as the Damascus scribe. At Corinth and other stops on the return trip, he was, however, known as the Jewish tutor. Millie?
This was an eventful period in Jesus' life. While on this journey, he made many contacts with his fellow men. But this experience is a phase of his life which he never revealed to any member of his family, nor to any of the apostles. Jesus lived out his life in the flesh and departed from this world without anyone save Zebedee of Bethsaida, knowing that he had made this extensive trip. Some of his friends thought he had returned to Damascus. Others thought he had gone to India. His own family inclined to believe that he was in Alexandria, as they knew that he had once been invited to there for the purpose of becoming an assistant Chazan.
So all of it was a big mystery to everyone where Jesus went, then, wasn't it?
When Jesus returned to Palestine, he did nothing to change the opinion of his family that he had gone from Jerusalem to Alexandria. He permitted them to continue in the belief that all the time he had been absent from Palestine had been spent in the city of learning and culture. Only Zebedee, the boat builder of Bethsaida, knew the facts about these matters, and Zebedee told no one.
In all your efforts to decipher the meaning of Jesus' life on earth, you must be mindful of the motivation of the Michael bestowal. If you would comprehend the meaning of many of his apparently strange doings, you must discern the purpose of his sojourn on your world. He was consistently careful not to build up an over-attractive and attention-consuming personal career. He wanted to make no unusual or overpowering appeals to his fellow men. He was dedicated to the work of revealing the Heavenly Father to his fellow mortals, and at the same time was consecrated to the sublime task of living his mortal earth life, all the while subject to the will of the same paradise Father. Now, if you're thinking about this, if Jesus would have let everyone know that he had gone to Rome and all this other thing, they'd start building up this concept of him of being this very well-traveled, very well-known person, right? And that was not his mission. His mission was to reveal the love of the Father, the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man. So this did not fit in with the concept he wanted to reveal to other people, right? Millie, would you take the next one?
It will also always be helpful in understanding Jesus' life on earth if all mortal students of this divine bestowal will remember that while he lived this life of incarnation on Urantia, he lived it for his entire universe. There was something special and inspiring associated with the life he lived in the flesh of mortal nature for every single individual sphere throughout the universe of Nebuchadnezzar. The same is also true of all the worlds which have become habitable since the eventful time of his sojourn on Urantia, and it will likewise be equally true of all worlds which may become inhabited by will creatures in all the future history of this local universe.
So this is an example life for all types of beings and all planets all over the local universe, right?
The Son of Man during the time and through the experiences of this tour of the Roman world practically completed his educational contact training with the diversified peoples of the world in this day and generation. By the time of his return to Nazareth through the medium of this travel training, he had just about learned how man lived and wrought out his existence on Urantia.
The real purpose of his trip from around the Mediterranean basin was to know men. He came very close to hundreds of humankind on his journey. He met and loved all manner of men, rich and poor, high and low, black and white, educated and uneducated, cultured and uncultured, animalistic and spiritual, religious and irreligious, moral and immoral. Millie?
On this Mediterranean journey, Jesus made great advances in his human task of mastering the material and mortal mind, and his indwelling adjuster made great progress in the ascension and spiritual conquest of this same human intellect. By the end of this tour, Jesus virtually knew, with all human certainty, that he was the Son of God, a creator Son of the universal Father. The adjuster more and more was able to bring up in the mind of the Son of Man shadowy memories of his paradise experience in association with his divine Father, ere he ever came to organize and administer this local universe of Nebuchadnezzar. Thus did the adjuster little by little bring to Jesus' human consciousness those necessary memories of his former and divine existence in the various epochs of the well-nigh eternal past. The last episode of his pre-human experience to be brought forth by the adjuster was his farewell conference with Emmanuel of Salvington, and before his surrender of conscious personality to embark upon the Urantia incarnation. And this final memory picture of pre-human existence was made clear in Jesus' consciousness on the very day of his baptism by John in the Jordan.
Isn't it interesting here that talks about him, the adjuster bringing this information little by little to the consciousness of Jesus? And if you think about it, when we eventually fuse with our adjuster, all the past experiences of the adjuster will be brought forth to our human mind, just like this adjuster is bringing forth to Jesus' mind. So the experience that the adjuster had before fusing with us will become ours little by little, just like this was once we fuse with him in the mansion worlds, right? It's kind of interesting. So we have something else to look forward to. Diane?
4. The human Jesus. To the onlooking celestial intelligences of the local universe, this Mediterranean trip was the most enthralling of all Jesus' earth experiences, at least of all his career right up to the event of his crucifixion and mortal death. This was the fascinating period of his personal ministry in contrast with the soon following epic of public ministry. This unique episode was all the more engrossing because he was at this time still the carpenter of Nazareth, the boat builder of Capernaum, and the scribe of Damascus. He was still the Son of Man. He had not yet achieved the complete mastery of his human mind. The adjuster had not fully mastered and counterparted the mortal identity. He was still a man among men.
What do y'all think about that? You know, him, the celestial intelligence find this as the most enthralling part of his earth experience. Isn't that interesting?
It is.
It
Because he was truly himself the Son of Man.
Yeah, it really is. So the thing that the all the beings out there in the universe find most interesting was this personal ministry rather than the public ministry, which I think is fascinating myself. All right. The purely human religious experience, the personal spiritual growth of the Son of Man well nigh reached the apex of attending during the 29th year. This experience of spiritual development was a consistently gradual growth from the moment of the arrival of the thought adjuster until the day of completion and confirmation that the natural and normal human relationship between the material mind of man and the mind endowment of the spirit, the phenomena of making these two minds one, the experience which the Son of Man attained in completion and finality as an incarnated mortal of the realm on the day of his baptism in the Jordan. Quite fascinating. Millie?
Turn the mic on. Throughout these years, while he did not appear to engage in so many seasons of formal communion with his Father in heaven, he perfected increasingly effective methods of personal communication with the indwelling spirit presence of the Paradise Father. He lived a real life, a full life, a truly normal, natural, and average life in the flesh. He knows from personal experience the equivalent of the actuality of the entire sum and substance of the living of the life of a human being on the material worlds of time and space.
They keep reiterating the fact that he experienced the same life that we do. Right? All right. Bill, Diane.
The Son of Man experienced those wide ranges of human emotion which reach from superb joy to profound sorrow. He was a child of joy and a being of rare good humor. Likewise was he a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. In a spiritual sense, he did live through the mortal life from the bottom to the top, from the beginning to the end. From a material point of view, he might appear to escape living through both social extremes of human existence, but intellectually he became wholly familiar with the entire and complete experience of humankind.
Jesus knows about the thoughts and feelings, the urges and impulses of the evolutionary and ascendant mortals of the realm from birth to death. He has lived the human life from the beginnings of physical, intellectual, and spiritual selfhood up through infancy, childhood, youth, and adulthood, even to the human experience of death. He not only passed through these usual and familiar human periods of intellectual and spiritual advancement, but he also fully experienced those higher and more advanced phases of human and adjuster reconciliation which so few Urantia mortals ever attain. And thus he experienced the full life of mortal man, not only as it is lived on your world, but also as it is lived on other evolutionary worlds of time and space. even on the highest, most advanced of all worlds, settled in light and life. Okay, this paragraph tells us that this life that we go through, this experience we could call life, is the same on all worlds, isn't it? All the way up through the advanced worlds. We all experience these same emotions and struggles just as every other being in the universe does. So when you think of alien worlds and things out there, they're not so alien, are they? They're going through the same thing. All right, Millie.
Although this perfect life which he lived in the likeness of mortal flesh may not have received the unqualified and universal approval of his fellow mortals, those who chanced to be his contemporaries on earth, still the life which Jesus of Nazareth lived in the flesh and on Uraja did receive full and unqualified acceptance by the universal Father as constituting at one and the same time and in one and the same personality life the fullness of the revelation of the eternal God to mortal man and the presentation of perfected human personality to the satisfaction of the infinite Creator.
And that's the goal of the Creator Sons, isn't it? The bestowal goal is to do just that. Change here, and I'm going to read it from this one since that's far away.
And this was his true supreme purpose. He did not come down to live on Urantia as the perfect and detailed example for any child or adult, any man or woman in that age or any other. True it is, indeed, that in his full, rich, beautiful, and noble life we may all find much that is exquisitely exemplary, divinely inspiring, but this is because he lived a true and genuinely human life. Jesus did not live his life on earth in order to set an example for all other human beings to copy. He lived this life in the flesh by the same mercy ministry that you all may live your lives on earth. And as he lived his mortal life in his day, and as he was, so did he thereby set the example for all of us thus, to live our lives in our day and as we are. You may not aspire to live his life, but you can resolve to live your lives even as and by the same means that he lived his. Jesus may not be the technical and detailed example for all the mortals of all ages on all the realms of this local universe, but he is everlastingly the inspiration and guide of all paradise pilgrims from the worlds of initial ascension up through a universe of universes and on through a other to paradise. Jesus is the new and living way from man to God, from the partial to the perfect, from the earthly to the heavenly, from time to eternity.
By the end of the 29th year, Jesus of Nazareth had virtually finished the living of the life required of mortals as sojourners in the flesh. He came on earth, the fullness of God, to be manifest to man. He had now become well nigh the perfection of man, awaiting the occasion to become manifest to God. And he did all of this before he was 30 years of age. That's the end of paper 129. Next week.
I just want to tell you that in the front of the book, it does say, and I can't find it right off the top of my head, it's in one of the first of the 4 papers, he is not an example. He did not come to be an example, he came to be an inspiration.
He came to be an inspiration, that's right.
It says here that he did set the example.
Yes, he did.
But he did not come to be an example.
He did not come to be he came to be an inspiration. That's right. Not an example, but he did set the example, right? All right. Next week we'll take on the way to Rome. So next week we're going to discuss those 2 years while he was gone on the Rome, the ones that the rest of the universe finds so interesting. So we'll take that up on next week. Diane, would you say a little prayer to close us today?
Dear Paradise Father, how much we thank you for this opportunity to learn and grow from your revelation given to us. May it be nourishment and inspiration to all who hear it, and may we continue to grow in your love and understanding and depth. We thank you for learning about Jesus' daily life in these papers that we have been reading the last few weeks, and we thank you for this so very much. We ask our special blessing on all of our loved ones and our families, and It is in your name, Jesus, always we pray. Christ Michael of Nebadon. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us at home. Please come see us again. God bless you.